Today we're going to start the first video for Chapter 10. This is 10-2 and I'm on page 2 of the Chapter 10 notes. What we're going to do today is we're going to find exact values. Usually exact values have radicals in them of trig functions, and the trig functions are going to be sine, cosine, and tangent. So what you're going to be given are sine, cosine, and tangent of different angles, but now what we're going to have is radians instead of degrees. So if you go through this four-step process that I outline, you'll be able to get to the answer to all of these problems. And what we have to do first is, I'll go through this first example with these four steps. The first thing we're going to do is either draw and label our special right triangles, which is our 30, 60, 90. 1, 2, square root of 3. Or our 45, 45, 90, which is 1, 1, square root of 2. So we're either going to do that, or we're going to use our trick that we learned about the radical. We're going to have a sine and a cosine of 30, 45, or 60 degrees. And we just write 1, 2, 3. Or 3, 2, 1, and this is all over 2. So the sine of 30 is a half, the sine of 40 is the square root of 2 over 2, the sine of 60 is the square root of 3 over 2, the cosine of 30 is the square root of 3 over 2, the cosine of 45 is the square root of 2 over 2, and the cosine of 60 is 1 over 2. Square root of 1 is 1 over 2. So this is a nice little trick for our special angles. So that's step one. You're either going to use this or you're going to use this. All right, the second thing we're going to do is we're going to be given radians, so we need to convert the radians into degrees. And when we convert radians into degrees, we're going to let pi radians equal 180 degrees. That's the conversion we're using. The third step is to note the quadrant and the sign from All Students Take Chemistry. And then the last step is we're going to write as a trig function which is just sine, cosine, or tangent of the acute angle, which is really just our reference angle. So what does all this mean? Well, what we're asked for is to find the exact value of the sine of 5 pi over 4. This is our angle, 5 pi over 4. So what we're going to do is, well, we've already set up our tricks up here. So what we're going to do is step 2, convert radians to degrees. And remember, pi radians is 180 degrees. So we're just going to take that pi out of there and insert 180 degrees. 5 times 180 over 4. 5 times 180 divided by 4 is 225 degrees. So what we're really asked for is the sine of 225 degrees, because that's how many degrees are in 5 pi over 4 radians. The second thing we're going to do is note what quadrant this is in. So 225 is in quadrant 3, because it's between 180 and 270. And All Students Take Chemistry says the sine of a quadrant 3 angle is going to be negative, because the only thing that's positive is tangent. So now the sine of 225, we've done this before, that's equal to the negative, because it's quadrant 3, sine of the reference angle. Well, the reference angle is just 225 minus 180, which is 45 degrees. So the sine of 225 is the negative sine of 45 degrees. They're the same thing. And then we know what the sine of 45 degrees is, either from our trick up here or from the special right triangle. I'm going to use this trick. The sine of 45 degrees is the square root of 2 over 2. So our final answer to this is negative square root of 2 over 2. And that's the end of that problem. The next problem cosine of 11 pi over 6, well, pi radians is equal to 180 degrees. So 11 times 180 over 6 is equal to 330 degrees. So what we're really asked for is the cosine of 330 degrees. Well, 330 degrees, that's a quadrant 4 angle. And if you look at All Students Take Chemistry, the cosine of quadrant 4 is positive. So we're going to do a positive cosine of the reference angle. Well, the reference angle for 330 is 360 minus 330. And that's going to give us a 30-degree reference angle. So we're asked for really the cosine of 30 degrees, positive. Well, the cosine of 30 degrees is the square root of 3 over 2. So our answer is positive square root of 3 over 2. And that's the end of that problem. The next problem, tangent of 5 pi over 6. Well, pi radians is 180 degrees. So 5 times 180 over 6 is equal to 150 degrees. So we're really asked to find the tangent of 150 degrees. Well, 150 degrees, that's in quadrant 2. All Students Take Chemistry says that quadrant 2, the tangent is going to be negative. So the tangent of 150 is equal to the negative tangent of the reference angle. 180 minus 150 is our reference angle, which is 30. So negative tangent of 30 degrees. Well, this trick up here really doesn't tell us too much about a tangent unless we know that sine over cosine is tangent. So what we can really do is say, well, the tangent of 30 degrees is the square root of 1 over the square root of 3. Or, if you want to look at this special triangle, remember tangent is opposite over adjacent, and here you get 1 over the square root of 3, which is the same thing that this tells us. So the tangent of 30 degrees is negative 1 over the square root of 3. But we usually don't like radicals in the denominator for some reason. So the final answer is going to be negative square root of 3 over 3 after you rationalize the denominator. Multiply the top and bottom by the square root of 3. So you get negative square root of 3 over 3 is your final answer for number 3. Number 4, pi radians is 180 degrees. And so 4 times 180 divided by 3 is equal to 240 degrees. So we're really asked to find the sine of 240 degrees. 240 degrees is a quadrant 3 angle. All Students Take Chemistry says sine goes negative in quadrant 3, so that's the negative sine of the reference angle, 240 minus 180. The reference angle is 60 degrees, so we've got the negative sine of 60 degrees. Up here, looking at our trick, the sine of 60 degrees is the square root of 3 over 2. So our answer is the negative square root of 3 over 2. Notice our exact values, all of them so far have had radicals in them. That's what exact value means. We're not going to get these answers out of our calculator. Sorry, I hope you saw what I was writing here. The cosine of 2 pi over 3, pi radians equals 180 degrees. So we have 2 times 180 divided by 3. We've got a 120 degree angle here that we're talking about. So we're finding the cosine of 120 degrees. Now any of these you want to try on your own, be my guest. Shut off the video and try it on your own. 120 degrees is a quadrant 2 angle. All Students Take Chemistry tells us in quadrant 2 the cosine goes negative. So we have a negative cosine of the reference angle, 180 minus 120, 60 degrees. So we're going to go up to our trick and figure out this cosine of 60 degrees. Well, the cosine of 60 degrees is the square root of 1 over 2. Well, the square root of 1 is just 1. So the cosine of 60 is just a half. So this answer is equal to negative 1/2. This is one of the few that we could check in our calculator if we wanted to. The cosine of 120 degrees, as long as we're in degrees mode, we can do the cosine of 120 degrees, and it'll tell us, if we math frac it, it'll tell us -1/2. The tangent of 5 pi over 3 pi radians equals 180 degrees. 5 times 180 divided by 3 is 300 degrees. So we're asked to find the tangent of 300 degrees. Well, 300 degrees is in quadrant 4. And All Students Take Chemistry tells us the tangent of a quadrant 4 angle is negative. So we have the negative tangent. The reference angle of quadrant 4 is 360 minus the given angle. And 360 minus 300 is 60 degrees. So we're asked to find the negative tangent of 60 degrees. Well, since sine over cosine is tangent, the tangent of 60 degrees is the square root of 3 over the square root of 1. Or if you want to go to this triangle here, opposite over adjacent, the square root of 3 over 1 is the tangent of 60 degrees. So we have negative square root of 3 over 1. You don't have to put over 1 because it's just the square root of 3 negative. So whenever you see exact values, note that you have to use our trick, and probably your answer is going to have a radical in it. Not always, like in this example, but mostly you're going to have radical answers. Now let's go and do the reverse. The reverse, the second part of this, says we're going to find two answers to every question down here. 2 values of theta, which means 2 angles. 2 angles are going to be in our answer. 2 angles given the exact value of its trig function. So now I'm going to be given the sine. Like up here, I was asked to find the sine of an angle. Now I'm going to be given the sine of the angle, and I'm going to be finding 2 angles that has this sine. Follow this 4-step process and you won't go wrong. You're going to use All Students Take Chemistry first to write down 2 quadrants. Circle this, 2 quadrants that our angles are going to come from. That's where the 2 angles are from, 2 different quadrants. Then we're going to figure out a reference angle that has the given exact value. And then once we have our reference angle, depending on what quadrant we're in, we're either going to do 180 minus the reference angle if it's a quadrant 2, 180 plus the reference angle if it's quadrant 3, or 360 minus the reference angle if our answer is in quadrant 4, or if we have a quadrant 1 angle, it's just whatever the reference angle is. So these 2 quadrants, you're going to get two out of these 4 options here. And then the last thing we're going to do is convert back to radians again. So what does that mean? First of all, the sign is positive. This is a positive number. If you go down here to number 10, 10 is negative. You can see this is a negative. 10, 11, and 12 are all negative. 7, 8, and 9 are all positive values. So, All Students Take Chemistry says sine is a positive answer in quadrants. Let's write it down. Quadrant 1, sine is positive. Quadrant 2, sine is positive. So we got 2 quadrants where sine is positive. So that's the first step. Second step is find the reference angle. Well, which one of these angles up here has a sine equal to the square root of 2 over 2? Well, it must be 45 degrees. The sine of 45 degrees is the square root of 2 over 2. So our reference angle, we're going to mark that over here. Our reference angle is 45 degrees. That's step 2. Step 3 says if you've got quadrant 1, your answer is the reference angle. Quadrant 2, 180 minus the reference angle. So let's just set this up in a table. Theta is our angle. In quadrant 1, it is our reference angle, 45 degrees. Quadrant 2, theta is equal to 180 degrees minus our reference angle. 180 minus 45 is 135. So that's step 3. You've got 2 answers, 2 values of theta. And the last thing we're going to do is figure out what they are in radians. So in radians, what you're going to do is you're just going to do 45 pi over 180, or In other words, 45 divided by 180, and then you're going to do a math frac. Watch this. 45 divided by 180, math frac, you get 1/4. Whoops. 45 over 180 math frac, you get 1/4. So 45 pi over 180 is 1 pi over 4. So that's our final answer for quadrant 1 is pi over 4. In quadrant 2, we're going to do 135 divided by 180, math frac, and then we're going to put a pi in the numerator. So 135 divided by 180, this is how you convert from degrees to radians, math frac, and you're going to get 3/4. And now what you're going to do is just put a pi up on the top, and it's 3 pi over 4. So now we have our two answers, pi over 4 and 3 pi over 4. That's the end of that problem. Next, we're going to get a reference angle. Which angle has a tangent of square root of 3 over 3? Well, you can do a lot of different tricks, but the square root of 3 over 3 reference angle is 30 degrees. And where is tangent positive? Quadrant 1 it's positive, quadrant 3 is positive, so let's mark those down. Quadrant 1 and quadrant 3. Well, the reference angle is 30 degrees. So in quadrant 1, the answer is just the reference angle. Quadrant 3, it's 180 plus the reference angle. So theta is equal to 180 plus our reference angle of 30 degrees, which is 210. And now what we're going to do is convert these to radians. So 30 over 180, math frac, with a pi on the top. 30 over 180, math frac, gives us 1/6. So our answer is pi over 6. That's our first angle. Our second angle is 210 over 180. Put a pi up on top. 210 divided by 180, math frac. 7 over 6, but put a pi on top, so 7 pi over 6 is our other angle. 7 pi over 6 is our other angle. So those are our two answers for number 8. Number 9. Cosine is positive in what two quadrants? It's positive in quadrant 1, and it's positive in quadrant 4, says all students take chemistry. Well, what is our reference angle? Well, which angle has a cosine equals square root of 3 over 2? It looks like it's 30 degrees, square root of 3 over 2. So our reference angle is 30. In quadrant 1, the angle is just the reference angle, 30 degrees. And we've already converted 30 degrees to radians back here. It's just pi over 6, so I'm just going to put a pi over 6 and not have to do the math again. In quadrant 4 says we're going to find our angle doing 360 minus the reference angle. So our theta value is 360 degrees minus the reference angle. 360 minus 30 is 330. So that's our angle in degrees. And in radians, we do 330 over 180. Plop a pi on top. 330 divided by 180, math frac, gives us 11 pi over 6. So that's our final answer. Our theta value is equal to 11 pi over 6. So there's our two angles. On to number 10. This time we have a sign going negative. So the two quadrants where sign is negative is quadrants 3 and 4. That's where our two answers are coming from. What is the reference angle? Which angle has a sign equal to a half? It looks like 30 degrees, 1 over 2, square root of 1 over 2. So we'll write down our reference angle is 30 degrees. Well, in quadrant 3, in order to get a quadrant 3 angle, we do 180 plus the reference angle. And in quadrant 4, we'll do 360 minus the reference angle. So we'll use these two. So our theta value is equal to 180 plus the 30 degree reference angle. Let me zoom in a little bit so you can see this a little bit better. 180 plus 30 degrees is 210 degrees. Well, if you want to convert 210 to radians, you do 210 divided by 180 always, math frac. And it looks like it's 7 pi. Oh, we already did 7 pi over 6 over here. So 210 degrees, the theta value is 7 pi over 6. In quadrant 4, theta is equal to 360 minus the reference angle, which is 330 degrees. And we've already done 330 degrees back here, converted that into radians, and that turns out to be 11 pi over 6. So we don't have to do all that math again. So theta is equal to 11 pi over 6. So there's our two answers to question number 10. Always two answers. Moving on to question number 11. Where does the tangent go negative? Well, tangent is positive in 1 and 3, so it must be negative in 2 and 4. So we have a quadrant 2 answer and we have a quadrant 4 answer. And what is our reference angle? What angle will give you a tangent that's equal to the square root of 3 over 1? Well, sine over cosine, square root of 3 over 1, that would be a 60-degree reference angle. A 60-degree reference angle for number 11. And you can check these on your blue sheets also. So in quadrant 2, we're going to do 180 minus the reference angle. 180 minus 60 is 120. And I don't think we've converted 120 to radians yet, so let's do that on our calculator. 120 divided by 180, math, frac. 2/3, so it's 2 pi over 3. There's our first answer. And in quadrant 4, it is 360 minus the reference angle. 360 minus 60 is 300 degrees. And have we done 300 yet? I don't think so. So 300 divided by 180, math, frac, gives us 5/3. So our angle is 5 pi over 3. So there's our two values of theta, our two angles. One more, and we're done for the day. Cosine is negative 1/2. Well, what quadrants does cosine go negative in? Well, it's positive in 1 and 4, so it's negative in 2 and 3. So quadrant 2, quadrant 3. What is our reference angle? What angle has a cosine equal to 1/2? Well, it looks like it's 60 degrees up here, right? Cosine of 60 is 1 over 2. So there's our reference angle of 60 degrees. In quadrant 2, we do theta is equal to 180 minus the reference angle. 180 minus 60 is 120 degrees. Have we done 120 already today? Yes, 120 was back here. It's 2 pi over 3. So theta is 2 pi over 3 for number 12. And in quadrant 3, theta is 180 plus the reference angle, which is 240 degrees. Let's see, have we done 240 yet? 240. I don't see it. Okay, 240 divided by 180, math, frac, is 4/3. So we got 4 pi over 3. So there we go. And to summarize, you got two angles in all of these problems. This one is working backwards from what we did up here. Up here we were given the angle, we were asked to find the sine or the cosine or the tangent. Down here we were given the sine, cosine, or tangent and asked to find not one angle, but two angles that come from two different quadrants. So hopefully this made sense, and we'll see you tomorrow.